Hi everybody, welcome to Birth of a Mountain, part one. The mountain is that. You can see it's not done, it's white, but it's ready for painting. So what I want to do in this video is kind of talk through the process I went through as I built that, some of the challenges I faced, and really just kind of all the things that I did this week. And it was a lot of hours of work doing that. A lot of fun though, I really enjoyed it. So let's take a look. Okay, so here's the mountain. And this is the product of 1 week's worth of hard work, but well worth it, I think. I love the way it's turning out. Can't wait to get it all painted and I think it's gonna look amazing. In the foreground here is that brass and iron foundry, and it's gonna sit really nice in this scene. So this video is about showing or talking about how I got to this stage. So the first thing you need to do with any mountain is to create a foundation for it. Many techniques and ways to do that. I like foam board. I'll show this with my hand here. These foam boards you buy at Home Depot, I think they work really well. Glue them together with some hot glue, and then carve. And carving is challenging at times. I tend to use mostly, or I have in the past, used this knife. I use this knife for a lot of things. As you can tell, it's been quite used. But, I have in my head kind of the forms that I'm looking for. And then I'll just use that knife to carve that foam board to get it to the shapes that I'm looking for. But as you can see in this case, I've got some really deep crevices in these mountains. And so what I tried this time is to use this little saw, and it worked great. Never used that before for this. I use it a lot for other things, but I've never used it to carve foam board. But when I had to, get in and carve that foam board, that deep, I thought, yeah, that that's gonna take a lot of time and a lot of effort. So tried that tool and it worked amazing. Cut right through it like butter. Obviously you gotta be very careful with any power tools. But that is a technique I'm going to use going forward because I really loved it. It gave me so much more flexibility to do all that carving that you see here. So let's talk about that line and why that line exists in the middle. So this mountain consists of two sections. The first section here is fixed. It's mounted into the scene. But there's a lot of track running underneath there, and I've made the mistake in the past of building these mountains and having no way of getting access to that track. You can see there's a wall behind me. I can't get in from the backside. So this second section is removable. And it's a big section, it's a little heavy, but it works. And that's another good reason for using foam board. That makes it easy to take it right out. So the line, there's always going to be a line. I'm not perfectly happy with that. I think especially this one part right here, I know I can get that looking a little bit tighter, a little bit more like it does up at the top. So I'll do that later, but it's coming along really nicely. It's love how the two sections kind of came together. So once I get the foam board in and I get it all carved the way I want, my next technique is to use sculptamold. I love and hate this. I'll tell you that in a minute. So sculptamold. I'll cover the entire scene with sculptamold, even those areas that I'm going to put the rock in. And the reason I do that is it gives me a good visual for the entire layout and the entire mountain. Sometimes if I'm just looking at foam board, I don't have a good sense of where I want my rock formations to be. So yes, it's a little overkill, but I'll sculptamold everything unless I know, like in this case where that rock wall is, I know that's gonna be a rock wall. I didn't put the sculptamold behind that. I said I love and hate it. It's so easy to use, but it doesn't, you know, I don't know, sometimes that it doesn't look great. You know, I love working with hydrocal plaster, and I just think that paints up really well. And sometimes to a fault, though. Sometimes I'll put way too many rock formations in my mountains. I think I did a good balance this time. I don't know. So far, I like it. I'll come back and look at it in a few weeks and see if I still think that. So that's the next step in my process. I get all my sculptamold down and usually take a night to think about it, and then I'll come back and look and say, okay, where should I put my rock formations? And you'll kind of see some of the decisions I made in this particular case. So some are obvious, like where you've got a rock wall. And then, like I said before, I think one of my challenges is I start putting rock formations everywhere. And so this, I think, as I said, I think in this case, I have a nice balance between what'll be rock and you know, some, I guess, call it more dirt areas to be covered. But anyway, a couple other things I want to talk about. Once I got the sculptamold down, I put the rock in, and what I use is hydrocal plaster, and I'll do that in one of two ways. Normally, or I should say usually, what I'll do is just plop it in a certain area, like right here, and then I'll use a popsicle stick to move it around and kind of create some shapes. I don't always know what I'm looking for when I plop it in, but you know, I just throw it down and start moving it around, and usually some shapes start taking shape, and I'll move it around, and then I'll use my hobby knife once that plaster hardens up to start carving that rock. And, you know, getting, here, I'll show down here, getting all that, the crevices in. And you want to try to create a lot of variations, a lot of texture, depth, things that will look interesting when you're painting them. Avoid, anything that looks smooth or unrealistic. Try to minimize, kind of knife cuts. I have some in here where I got to come back later and clean some of this up. I didn't brush all the debris out of the rock yet, so you might see a little bit of that in there. But that's what I'll do. There's a video, one of my favorite videos online, where this gentleman is carving rock. He's got one of the knives in both hands. These look like Edward Scissorhands, just chopping away at it. I think at best I'm Edward Scissorhand, because I can't use two knives at a time, haven't mastered that technique. So as I said, usually my technique is just plopping the hydrocal plaster down and carving away. But when there's a rock wall, like here, I'll use a mold. So here's the mold I used for that. And I use a mold, and I love this mold in particular. I got it at a hobby store. I love it because it's big, and that one mold for that wall. So I think molds give you the most realistic look. So when I can use them, I'll use them. But, when you're doing things like these, there's not necessarily the mold that fits the exact shape that you're kind of looking for, situation you're looking for. So it's a combination of each. And, I think the advantage of the mold is it looks more realistic. Sometimes the work I do with my hands starts looking the same. I have the same techniques, even though I try to create some variation. You can't help but be a little bit repetitive. And so anyway, that's how I do the rock. Before, I want to point out also tunnels. Before I mount, do the mountain and finish it off where I can't get access any longer, I will finish out my mountains. So I'll use my sculptamold inside, paint it black, and do all my ballasting just to the point where the eye can see. And I do that because I think you want this look where it looks like it's just the train just going into darkness. And I think there's nothing worse than in a mountain scene where you look in the tunnel and you see benchwork or foam boards or anything else other than darkness. So anyway, that came out really nice. You can't see anything in there. And anyway, that's, I'll do that before I put the top on so that, it's a lot easier to do it when you can have access to it than trying to stick your hand in that little tunnel and doing the work. Anyway, I think that's all I wanted to talk about at this point. I would love feedback on painting rock faces. That's something I don't feel like I have a really good technique on. I think when I did the layout walkthrough, I showed some rock around my waterfall that I think came out way too dark. And in other cases, I find it, it has been too gray and uniform. So if you have a technique that you like and is working for you, share it with me if you would. I would love it. I can test it out and see. Like I said, I'm looking for a really good technique on handling all these rock faces. So anyway, I hope you enjoy, and look forward to providing the next video.